Early Thomas internet media is a special thing to me. You've got Thomas the Chav Engine,
My usual runner has got his wheels nicked.
the strange fast-forward remake, train building or racing flash games. It was the best thing to do when you weren't playing with Trackmaster or take-along trains. There's one video, or set of videos I should say, in particular that stand out for being the most inspirational though. Basically everyone had dreams of collecting so much Tomy or Trackmaster, you could build a dream layout, the entire island of Sodor. Hell, almost every advertisement teased you with that same idea. But not many people ever got to get to that point. Truly make a proper Sodor layout with their toys. But what if you did? What if you really had what the normal person may call too much Thomas? Well, probably something like this. Now, every train layout or set, they all have stories, and this one is no different. There's a video made by them that shows this off wonderfully, which I'll have linked in the description, and which also helped me a ton with this video. But the Too Much Thomas crew, as you probably guessed, was a family-run thing, coming straight out of Australia and starting in 2000. It started in a way presumably not too dissimilar from most people, with a single train set and the essential help from Dad. More birthdays and holidays meant more trains, and in no time a proper layout was starting to form, as we can see here in 2001. The first real display by the Too Much Thomas crew, and keep in mind I'm not sure they were called that at this point, didn't come around until 2002 however. Here we can see the first exhibition the Tomy trains were ever taken to, and how quickly 2 years can grow a basic playset. This was at the Toowoomba Model Train exhibition, and presumably sparked quite the spark in the kids and family. The next year, nothing had changed except the date and how much they had. Even more birthdays, even more opportunities. The passion was becoming more and more clear, and the layout more and more complex with it. This all would truly come to a head in 2004, however, where not only pieces like the spirals and Big Thomas were added, but scenes like the harbor as well. Here we can see one of the larger bits deemed Toby's Tower, that kids even now would lose their mind to have or build. In 2005, they would start a 2 meter by 5 meter layout, trying to do much of the last. Show off scenes, some of the larger and cooler pieces of merch, unique or coded consists and running. They even built a small Tidmouth shed scene, with an old chain spinning on a turntable. It truly was lovely stuff. And don't think the family slowed down in 2006. This is when we saw the introduction of a viaduct, and a whole second story added to the existing layout. There were snow scenes, roadways, huge station areas, almost any engine you could imagine, even non-Thomas ones. And while I'm not sure if anything was displayed or really happening in 2007, in 2008 we'd get even more Thomas. In a video called Setting Up June 2008, we finally could see a lot of the process the family went through when not only transporting but setting up this layout, usually taking about 3 hours. But once it was set up, it owned the room, like usual. The layout itself seems to be pretty similar to the 2006 version, but this time with even more detail added around, such as the mountain area or the slate incline right behind it. We also saw the first bits of Trackmaster slowly starting to creep its way onto the layout. 2008 wasn't just a time for seeing how the layout was built though. We would also see how the layout worked in another video called Up Close. This video in particular sticks out the most to me, since it shows the real ingenuity the family had to make this huge railway work, such as the slate incline that actually worked, and was powered by a retooled Gordon, utilizing magnetic switches to reverse the trucks going up or down, or the turntable, which we learn is an old record player, and also see even more smaller scenes emerge around the layout, such as Bulgy being made into a chicken coop, as well as the introduction of HO scale figures and details to spruce up the layout an extra bit. However, again, in 2009, things would only grow, and also start to get a bit more interesting since, as most of you guys probably know, this time was the real emergence of the Trackmaster era, and emerge it did from Too Much Thomas with grace. At this point, there wasn't a whole bunch to it, more utilizing as much of the new sets and engines and road vehicles as they could, and adding them into the layout. But then came 2010, and the real potential of combining Trackmaster with the older layout is really seen and built upon. Here we could see things like new sheds, new road pieces on much larger scales, entire Trackmaster yards, new characters, and all still using the original blue track on the 2x5. It does seem at this point Trackmaster started to take a heavier presence, but it's hard to blame them for that. With the more detailed track and trains, it was probably more appealing for the layout in some ways. There was even a smaller layout that was built of basically nothing but blue track, and more of a fun thing for the kids to play with. Then, in 2010, Too Much Thomas did something that really only seemed inevitable at this point.
Thomas the Tank Engine chugged into the Guinness Book of World Records today, setting a new record for stamina. It was an even bigger challenge for model builders who had to join together more than 10,000 pieces of track, but they'd trained for it.
At the workshop's Rail Museum, a world record was made and owned by the lads themselves, somehow managing to build a layout that came out to over 2 kilometers long, coming at a solid 2.14 kilometers of straight-up Trackmaster track, built in several different aligned spirals.
We've basically got 10,000 joins, and if the joins are just not quite right, he'll hit it and fall off.
It took 23 workers, over 212 hours of effort, and months of planning to do it all. But really, there was nobody better for the job. This wasn't your average train layout either. Like I mentioned, the iconic spiral was brought on to help achieve the world record, and really only adds to the spectacle that this layout is. I mean, look at it, it's just jaw-dropping. It's trans-like to just stare at. And didn't even stop at the endless seeming towers. In front of every one was a smaller layout with its own details and bits. It took a single Thomas 2 hours and 52 minutes to make it the full way around the layout. It was so massive, in fact, they didn't even know if Thomas would make it. It was such a big occasion, in fact, the Fat Controller himself even came out to have a word with the press.
See, the other thing on the island of Sodo is that we have a lot of accidents, so I hope Thomas doesn't actually fall off the track.
And as you probably expect, 2011 saw the crew not slowing down by a bit. They weren't breaking any more world records at this point, but they were keeping the magic very much alive. As we can see here, they kept adding to the 2x5, and just look how lovely it was at this time. Misty Island had its set introduced, the scenes got more details, it was their 10th year of displaying, and the layout was in full effect and full action. New destinations, new faces, and friends. It seemed like Trackmaster itself just couldn't keep up with the Too Much Thomas crew. But if you know anything about Too Much Thomas, you know 2011 was a special year. Not only because it was their 10th year anniversary, not only because the layout had reached peak levels of action and achievements, but they stopped. Uploads from the Too Much Thomas channel stopped completely. There were no more updates or videos to show off the layout. And unfortunately, being as young as I was and living in the States, I could never go and see for myself if the layout kept going up at exhibitions. To me and most of the world, this was the end of Too Much Thomas. And as sad as that may be, it isn't a bad thing either. Ray Murphy, the father who helped start it all, and his sons had managed to do something phenomenal with simple toys. But at this point, the boys were getting older. Trackmaster was changing. Sets got more expensive, and eventually would turn to complete shit. In 10 years, they had built a layout that most would only dream of, had a world record, but it simply couldn't be forever. And eventually, presumably, the family moved on. But regardless of that, and I think I speak for a lot of people when I say this, thank you so much, Murphy family, for being so inspirational and important to people like me. Being a kid and seeing all of this was probably the most inspiring thing I could have ever seen. It made a simple oval of track just useless, honestly, and showed me so much, like, hey, you can detail these things to look more real. Hey, you can make funny train videos and show off your progress too. Hey, you don't even need model trains to be in the modeling of trains side of things. Just a train set, some ambition, and help from dad never hurts too much. Thanks for watching.
Either subscribe, donate, or get the fuck out.